Hello everyone and welcome to the Jewish Museum London Facebook page. My name is Shireen and I am a learning officer at the Jewish Museum London, and I am delighted to host our very first Object Talk live. Now going forwards, every Wednesday at midday, myself or another member of the Jewish Museum Learning team will be sharing their very favourite object, linking to the museum theme of the week. Now, this week's theme is coming together. At the museum, we have over 40,000 objects. So it was pretty hard narrowing it down to find the perfect object that reflects this theme, coming together. However, the object I chose was John Schlapobersky's Bible. Now, I have just added a link to the comment section if you want to look at this object in a bit more detail. But before we start talking about the object itself, first of all, I would like to reflect on who John Schlapobersky was. Now, John Schlapobersky was the grandson of Lithuanian Jewish migrants who came to South Africa at the early 1900s. Now, they were not the only Lithuanian Jews to migrate to South Africa during this time. Thousands of Jewish people from Eastern Europe migrated, fleeing their home countries due to a fear of persecution and a lack of opportunity. Now, many of these Jewish people went to the US of A, some to Britain, and some to South Africa, a place that offered many opportunities at the time. Now, as often with migration movement, John Schlapobersky's family landed in South Africa, inviting the rest of the family to come together to South Africa to form a new home. Community was key. Now, between 1880 and 1914, the South African Jewish community grew tenfold to about 40,000 Jewish people, most with their roots in Eastern Europe. Now, growing up in South Africa, John Schlapobersky was brought up in a family who fought adamantly against apartheid. And John Schlapobersky was no exception. During his time at the University of Johannesburg, he came together with the Black South African community to fight for what was right. He wrote and spoke out against the apartheid many times, so much so that eventually police officers pulled him out of his lecture and sent him to the Pretoria Interrogation Centre, where he was tortured endlessly for 3 days. He spent 3 months in prison during this time, until he was deported to Britain. 3 months in prison, purely for standing together with a community. Now, where does this Bible play its part? This Bible is a small navy blue Bible, pocket-sized. But despite the size of this Bible, it tells us so much. This Bible was the only object that John was allowed to bring into prison during his time there. And despite John's Jewish identity, the Bible is actually a Christian Bible, for it contains the New Testament as well. Now, when you explore the object, the Bible, via the link, you will see that on the front page, John meticulously wrote the days in which he spent in the prison. But also, he brought together quotes from the Hebrew Bible as well as the New Testament. Quotes that perhaps acted as a source of hope or inspiration. Now, at the top of the page of the Bible, we see that John writes Numbers 14, a book in the Hebrew Bible, the Tanakh, the Torah. Now, Numbers 14 is a really interesting story in which Moses and the Israelites have recently been freed from Egypt, freed from slavery. But they encounter another issue. And at this point, the Israelites say to Moses, "Lord, why us? Moses, why us? Surely it's better for us to go back to the times when we were slaves." And Moses replies, "Do not be afraid. The Lord is with us." Now, thinking about John Schlapobersky's story, I'm sure he could relate to Numbers 14. His family had fled Lithuania because of a fear of persecution. And yet, he finds himself in prison, being persecuted again. But in number 14, we see the Lord's words. Do not be scared. Do not be afraid. But also in the Bible, John Schlapobersky leans on some New Testament sources of hope as well. We see that at the bottom of the page, he quotes John 13, verses 16. And he writes, "Verily, verily, I say to you, a servant is not greater than his Lord. Neither he that is sent is greater than he that sent him." Now, this verse, for me, really screams the importance of coming together as equals. Perhaps as John wrote this in his Bible, he was reminded that those who persecute him are no higher than him, but also he is no higher than those he fights for in South Africa. Coming together as equals and a community is incredibly important. And I'm sure it was in these verses that he found that hope. Now, of course, during this time, we can't come together physically in that way. But perhaps we could reflect on John Schlapobersky's life and this object and think about ways in which we could come together virtually. Perhaps coming together for other communities, like John Schlapobersky did for the Black South African people. Or perhaps we can bring quotes of inspiration together to inspire those during these times. Now today, I ask you to reflect on John Schlapobersky's story and this Bible and think about ways in which you can come together. Thank you. Bye.